biology and neurobiology. So these are all some animals that have some pretty unique sensory adaptations that we'll talk about in the coming days, if you don't already know. But I'll start with the basics. So humans have 5 senses. Do you guys know what the 5 senses are? Seeing, that's right. Perfect. So there they are, all 5 guys with the touch is shown. So our labs in particular focus on this guy in the middle here with the big hands, which represents a sense of touch. So we're very focused on understanding exactly how we can feel things, like heat, but also mechanical pressure. And those seem like really basic sensations that everyone has, but actually at the molecular level, it's very poorly understood. So we don't really know what's going on at the molecular level. What we do know is that you do need some organs to process sensory information. So what's an organ that's necessary for processing sensory information?
Brain.
The brain, yeah. Neuroscience. It's a good guess.
Skin.
The skin also, yeah. But there it is.
You good?
Brain was the right answer for this one. Too spicy. Some people thought it was not spicy, some people thought it was too spicy. So I guess everyone has a little bit different sensitivities to their heat levels. Are you sweating?
So we can actually use you for thermographic images at the end because you're sweating a lot.
Yeah. So back to the sensitivity and sensory processing. We know that the brain is important for processing sensory information because you can see that a large percentage of your cortex is dedicated to processing sensory information. So you have in the back of your brain here, you have the visual cortex, which is important for vision. You have the auditory cortex, which is important for hearing. You have the somatosensory cortex, important for touch. And so together these encompass a large amount of brain power. We got another one going down. Delayed burn? Yeah. So the nervous system is made up of a lot of different cells. And do you know what the name of the cells are that make up the brain?
Neurons.
Neurons, exactly. Among others, neurons are the prototypical cell that everyone else talks about. And here's the basic schematic of what it looks like. I'm sure you've all gone over it before, but it includes a nucleus in the cell body, like any other cell, but it also has these nice dendrites that look kind of like leaves or branches on a tree that can be used to communicate with other cells. And then they often have these long axons, these long kind of arms that stick out to reach other cells and surfaces. So you think of cells as being very small, right? But actually, if you think about an NBA player or something, a single cell will go from the spinal cord all the way down to the player's foot. So that can be several feet in length, just one cell. So these guys can be actually quite long, this axon. And the nervous system is made up of more than just one neuron. It's actually made up of millions and millions and millions of these things. And they're all talking to one another. So it can get pretty complicated, and this is why neuroscience is fairly complicated and still a lot to understand, but also quite exciting and kind of beautiful. I guess some people put this on their walls as artwork. And the basic properties of neurons that allow them to communicate with each other are the fact that they can conduct these electrical impulses called action potentials. So when one cell becomes activated, it will conduct an electrical impulse down the length of the axon to a synapse. Then you'll get release of neurotransmitters that will travel from the first cell to the next cell and activate that cell, or at least let it know that its neighbor was activated. And that's the basic of synaptic transmission. But it takes more than just the brain to perceive touch or vision or hearing or something like that. Because obviously the brain doesn't have eyes, doesn't have ears, it can't hear, touch, anything on its own. It needs all these other systems. And for touch, you need these peripheral nerves that go from the spinal cord all the way to different parts of your skin that allow you to touch with any part of your body. And there's actually some reflexes and things that don't require any sort of brain processing. So can anyone think of some action that might occur independently of the brain?
The stomach?
The stomach?
Yeah, it's a smooth muscle.
Yeah, in a way. That also has some inputs from the brain. But there are some, independent brain mechanisms there too. Can anyone think of anything else? Yeah.
Can he always produce blood?
Yeah, that too. I'm thinking more of like an action, like a large scale action.
Breathing is going through CNS.
Yeah. If you have brain damage in the right place, you won't be breathing either.
So what else?
Think about when you go to the doctors.
Yeah, think about hammers on the knee.
Yeah.
So reflexes.
Reflex.
Reflexes like, you know, the hammer on the knee or touching a hot stove, your first reaction actually doesn't travel to the brain. It's all through spinal cord loops. So you just get the one cell going to the spinal cord and then another cell going from the spinal cord to the muscle, and in that way it can be really fast release so you don't burn yourself or whatever the hammer thing is trying to protect you from. So here's a basic schematic of how the somatosensory system works. It starts at the skin here, which is a really busy organ. You have a bunch of neurons underneath the skin itself that respond to various stimuli like touch, but also cold temperatures, hot temperatures, chemicals, all types of things. And then when activated, like when you burn yourself, you get an action potential conducted to the spinal cord, and from the spinal cord up to the brain where it's further processed. So although that initial reaction when you touch a hot stove is independent of the brain, you then kind of think about the fact that you just burned your hand on the stove. And so burning yourself on the stove activates a certain set of channels. So these are basically just regulated holes in the cell membrane. And in the case of heat, it's called TRPV1. And when this channel encounters heat, it opens up, you get positive ions that travel into the neuron, activated, you get action potentials, and you get the sense of heat. But what's interesting is that a lot of you said that you felt hot, this guy started sweating, some other people started getting a little uncomfortable later. And that's because actually capsaicin, which is the active ingredient in chili peppers, activates the same channel that senses heat. So your brain is kind of tricked into thinking that you're hot. And the same thing happens when you eat mint, because you have a chemical in mint called menthol that will activate another channel that's activated by cold. And so plants have evolved a lot of these different molecules that presumably help them to avoid being eaten by other animals, because the animals will eat them and think that they just caught on fire or something. So it's quite interesting to try to explore the pharmacology and things of what these plants are doing. So that's how those feelings you were feeling are felt.